Please rise for the arrival of the Governor of Aruba, after which we will play our national anthem. You will find the lyrics of the anthem on the back of the menu cards. Please take your seats. His Excellency, Governor of Aruba, and distinguished wife. Honorable President of Parliament, His Excellency Prime Minister and his distinguished wife, honorable members of Parliament, Secretary of the Bonaire Chamber of Commerce and Industry, President of the St. Martin Chamber of Commerce and Industry, Secretary and Director of the St. Martin Chamber of Commerce and Industry, President of the St. Eustatius and Saba Chamber of Commerce and Industry, President of the Aruba Chamber of Commerce and Industry, distinguished members of the Aruban business community, distinguished guests, invitees, ladies and gentlemen, members of the press. Bonochi y Bombini to the 19th Annual Business Dinner Meeting of the Aruba Chamber of Commerce and Industry. My name is Michelle Brooks, and I have the pleasure of being your host this evening. This year again, we will be presenting a topic that will interest our business community related to the ongoing negotiations between the Aruba government and the two oil companies on a possible takeover of the refinery. The Chamber wants to highlight and give attention to this topic, as it is of crucial importance to the future economic development of our island. Therefore, we should consider both options, with or without the refinery. We are very pleased and honored to have in our midst tonight as panelists Mr. Harold Malenberg, who for 24 years served as president and CEO of DPALM Tours, before being named chairman of the board and shareholder of DPALM Corporation NV and affiliates. Mrs. Audrey Leclay, managing director of Maggie's, co-founder and president of Mambo Main Street Association, and founder and president of Adopt an Addict Foundation. And lastly, Mr. Milton Berlinski, who until recently served as the senior partner of the firm Goldman Sachs and Company, and he served for 25 years in that capacity. And Mr. Berlinski is currently one of the 3 founding partners of the Aruba Growth Fund. All the panelists will be given an opportunity to share their views and opinions on the subject of the future of Aruba without a refinery. So now, ladies and gentlemen, please allow me to introduce to you the president of the Aruba Chamber of Commerce and Industry, Mr. Jamal Mahawat Khan.
His Excellency, the Governor of Aruba, the Honorable Vice President of the Parliament of Aruba, distinguished wife, His Excellency, the Prime Minister of Aruba, I cannot see him yet. Ladies and gentlemen, bonne noche, good evening. It is an honor to address you this evening. Please allow me to make 2 preliminary remarks. First, the subject of this dinner was selected and communicated before PetroChina resurfaced as a potential buyer of the refinery. Second, the length of my speech delivered in the previous dinner has no bearing in the length of the speech of tonight. Relax, ladies and gentlemen, it will be shorter. The history of this island, Aruba, is a relatively young one, and the history of the country of Aruba is an infant history, and yet they are fascinating and challenged. Aruba has earned titles ranging from Isla Inutilis to one of the gems of the Caribbean. This title reflects also the challenges this island has faced in the near past. In the 1930s, the island transformed itself from an agriculture and fishing-based society into an industrial society. That in an era when the world was in shambles due to the Great Depression. The island managed to have the world's largest refinery, later the largest in the Western Hemisphere. This period in history brought relative stability, economic growth, welfare, and also cultural enrichment by immigration. On the eve of becoming an autonomous country within the Kingdom of the Netherlands, the pillar of the Aruban economy was blown apart. Lago ceased its refinery operation. Determination, courage, vision, and resilience led to the development of the secondary pillar, the tourism industry, into something major for the Aruban economy. The nostalgia for having a refinery was still in the air, and hence the refinery started its operations in 1991 as Coastal. In the meantime, between 1986 and now, there had been a major shift in the economy of Aruba. The ever-growing tourism deposed the refinery from its domination of the economy. The combination of factors such as changing ownerships from Coastal to El Paso to Valero, the oil industry's supply and demand of heavy sour crude, the age of the refinery, Valero not being an oil producer itself, the introduction of ultra-low sulfur fuel in the United States, Valero being a stock-listed company, and the insecurities created by the subsequent Aruban governments has led to a situation where we are now with the refinery. Operations are seized and it is up for sale. Again, we find ourselves as a nation on the crossroads of a major decision, which can impact the economy and the society for the long term. The choice is between a future with the refinery and a future without the refinery. The future with the refinery means that there will be a new owner. The government of Aruba and the people of Aruba have no say to whom Valero should sell their operations in Aruba. It is a private company having assets in Aruba, and they are free to sell, and we clearly acknowledge that. In the ideal situation, the potential buyer becomes the legal successor of Valero and continues the operation without any major changes. Unfortunately, we are not in that situation. The public opinion of Aruba has changed about having this polluting industry in Aruba, which has taken its toll on the public health and the development of San Nicolas. On top of it, the government of Aruba is striving to make Aruba a green gateway, which is a very applaudable endeavor. One could wonder if the government's vision of the future, green, clean, Aruba does have a space for a polluting industry. At the other hand, our reputation of being a reliable island for investments is also at stake. A trade-off is only worth if the Aruban people and commerce have a significant benefit. The potential buyer should commit themselves to have a natural gas facility within 2 years on the island, preferably a pipeline between Aruba and the junction near Punto Figo of the existing pipeline between Venezuela and Colombia. This commitment will oblige them to use natural gas for the energy and water production of the refinery. Our utility company should be allowed to tap into it at the landing facility. The gas-based energy and water production by the refinery and WEP will substantially lower the air pollution level on the island. It will also directly impact all households and businesses in Aruba because the utility costs will be curbed. The spin-off can be a gas-based economy in Aruba. This will create a win-win situation for everyone on the island, including the new owner of the refinery. The Chamber is of the opinion that under no circumstances the total refinery area can be transformed into a tank farm. This area, excluding the former Wickland tank farm area, is about 3% of Aruba. It should stay refinery area, or it should be cleaned up and used for other purposes other than tank farm. It is simply too valuable piece of land for Aruba to be used for oil storage. We should clearly keep in mind that we are not a developing nation with natural resources and lack of capital, but a small developed nation with a decent living standard and longing to become an example in the world of sustainable green economy. Therefore, we should not get carried away with soft promises, but hard and tangible commitment is needed. The current Prime Minister and his cabinet have developed a track record of dialogue with stakeholders in our community. Therefore, the Chamber is trusting upon that any agreement between the government of Aruba and the potential buyer which changes the current status quo will be properly communicated and debated in the Parliament and with the stakeholders to fathom if there is a base of support for it. The support of the Chamber of Commerce for any concession made additional to the current agreement between government and Valero is depending on the hard commitments of the potential buyer. And those commitments are regarding jobs for Aruban citizens, investment in pipeline or LNG facility, usage of natural gas for their energy production, adherence to the future environmental laws, the follow-up for in case the refinery operation is ceased and the subsequent usage of the land east of the water treatment plant of Zeewijk. In my prelude, I also outlined that this island has survived big blows to our economy in the past. This is a crucial moment in the economic history of Aruba and also in the development of Aruba. We are talking about relocating the port from Oranjestad, constructing a 4-lane highway up to Jaraweg. We should also dare to look and think beyond the refinery, because there will become a day when there will be no refinery in Aruba. Aruba's future without the refinery is the topic of this dinner, which will be presented by the distinguished panel and to be debated with you all, distinguished attendants. I wish you all, on behalf of the board and personnel of the Aruba Chamber of Commerce and Industry, a very pleasant and enjoyable evening. For now, I leave you in the capable hands of Mrs. Michelle Brooks, the MC and moderator for this evening. Thank you.
Okay, so did he live up to your expectation or what? Yes? Let me hear you give him a good round of applause for living up to his word. His staff was a little bit worried. You did good, Jamal, you did good. And now, I would like to invite Mr. Malmberg to begin his presentation on new economic possibilities.
Dignitaries, colleague, businessmen, ladies and gentlemen, I want to start off with something that I got from a friend of mine who's a Venezuelan who went to New York for the first time. He was equipped only with 3 words. He only knew the words ham and cheese. So when he arrived in New York, after 3 days, ham and cheese was coming out of his ear. So he asked a friend, he says, how do I order eggs? And he said, he says, just ask for eggs. So he did that. He says, 2 eggs, please. And they asked him, how do you want it? Boiled? You want it scrambled? Or is there any other way that you would like to have it? And his answer was ham and cheese. It shows you that we must have a fallback position, otherwise we'll be in trouble all the time. I want to start by thanking the government for the efforts they have made to keep the refinery open, to protect the jobs out there. But we must also accept the fact that refineries operating in countries that have no oil in their soil, we're a dying breed. So we have to start to look at other things to do. Let's remember that since the refinery, Lago refinery closed for the first time in 1985, the refinery already changed hands 3 or 4 times. So the handwriting is on the wall, and we should start to look at other things to do. If PetroChina makes the deal, we should not be surprised if it's a short-term deal. So we've already had that experience, so at least it shouldn't be a surprise to us. We must therefore search for another economic activity in the service fields to replace the refinery. Let's not wait until the refinery closes again the next time. Start planning now. I'm going to share with you there are 2 things we have a problem with. Number 1 is that the OPEC members no longer sell crude to large oil companies at highly discounted prices. That time is gone. All refineries located in countries which have no crude oil are therefore obsolete. OPEC members more and more want to have this establishment in their own countries. Furthermore, the refining experience and know-how remains in the hands of their own citizens. So the landscape of doing that kind of business does not look very good. If we paint a picture of what we have, because I remember many years ago when we looked at tourism as a new economic activity besides Lago, the considerations then were, we have friendly people and we have beautiful beaches, and those are the raw materials upon which we can develop a tourism industry. And that is what happened. So what else do we have that we can do, a second economic activity out there, which is one of the resources that we can use? We have 3 harbors. One in Oranjestad, one in Barcadera, and the other one in San Nicolas. We do know that the harbor in Oranjestad at this moment can only accommodate 5 ships, 3 of the mega ships and 2 smaller ones. There is no room for growth anymore. So we have to expand the harbor in order to be able to accommodate those large, really huge ships, which they call the Oasis class and those type. They're very large, carry about 6,000 passengers, and if they want to come to Aruba, our harbor would not be able to accommodate that, which means we can no longer operate a cruise business and grow it, and operate a container business and grow it side by side in the same location if we want them to grow. So what we have to do is we have to move one, which means we have to move the container business. Now that decision was already made for quite a while, that it was going to go to Barcadera. Barcadera has a couple of problems. The problem of Barcadera, number one, is it is not a natural harbor. So you have to constantly dredge it to keep the draft current. Another thing is that in front of it, there is a reef island, which means that the ships that go to Barcadera, if they're large ships, they have difficulty maneuvering. So Barcadera should actually be our last choice. And I'm explaining that because we have San Nicolas, the harbor in San Nicolas. It starts at the Marine Department of Valero, and it ends in Curacabay. It's huge. Large storage capacity, a lot of possibilities for Aruba to enter the container business for transshipment. Now, we would ask ourselves, how is this business going to go? Remember that it is the most efficient way to transport cargo to the region. And once you start doing that, there are some other things that you could do to grow that business in there. Rotterdam is one of the examples that I used. At this moment, in 2009, Rotterdam handled almost 9 million 20-foot containers as transshipment. It is the largest in Europe. The ones after it are Germany and Belgium. They've made it a huge business. But of course, it has a lot of spin-off. If you take large cargo ships, bring them to Aruba, and from Aruba put them on smaller boats to the areas in our surrounding, it is the most efficient way to get it to its final destination. But we have the other opportunity as well. Panama, at this moment, is making a killing, and they need some competition. What can we do as a spin-off from that business? China, Brazil, the United States, and Europe are actually building all kinds of products in China and in India because of the labor cost. you can imagine that those companies have huge problems because of their location, their geographical location. If they want to send, they cannot actually give proper after-sales service to their customers because, and I'm talking about machineries, and you need spare parts, and you need those kind of things. So if we take our offshore department, which we have in Aruba, which is well organized, it is running well, and utilize that to develop businesses where we can store these parts for these companies. And I had the pleasure of talking to Volvo, which is a worldwide company, and told them, you know, you're all the way in Brazil and in Sweden, in our region here and in Central America, you must have problems getting your parts in the hands of people. And they said, yes. We're looking for all kinds of ways of getting it because from Brazil, cargo coming to these regions, there are not too many ships. But if they can store it here, have the administration done here and send it over to the customers who buy it directly from here, it could develop quite an interesting business, which of course we have to go and market that idea. We have something else that could happen with it because San Nicolas would then become, first of all, the transshipment harbor for our containers. It will be our industrial area, and it will be the area where we are going to develop the kind of business that I just mentioned, which is serving large manufacturing companies out there. What I furthermore want to share with you is that we already have the management of an offshore offshore company. We already have a well-running harbor organization. Barcadera and Oranjestad fall under APA. The refinery in San Nicolas, the harbor, does not fall under APA because it's owned by Valero and managed by Valero, which means one of the first things we should do in this negotiation that's taking place now is take the harbor out of the equation, if possible, and have it under APA's management so that we can have a place to peacefully develop this kind of business. San Nicolas has a huge amount of space which we could use to develop this business. Now I've brought forward only one item. I believe that if we sit down with a group of thinkers in Aruba, in a think tank forum, we could come with many more ideas that we could do that is non-tourism, but is going to contribute to our economic well-being. We have had the fortune of having a refinery for a long time, and we enjoyed that. But our place in the refining business had its run. The time has gone to let it go. It also happens with people that are ill, that we want to hang on to them, only to their, it doesn't help. You have to let go. Our new challenge is to find a replacement in service-related economic activities. We have no raw materials in our soil. Up till now, we've heard many times that they were, but up till now we haven't seen them. So we have to work with ideas and services, and we have creative people enough, and we have a lot of youngsters, well-educated in Aruba, that are ready to take some of these challenges and make something out of it. I personally feel that our destiny at this moment is not in the manufacturing of oil products. We must now claim our place in the service-related industry. If we don't do that, we're going to stay behind. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Malmberg, for sharing that creative insight with us tonight. I just want to take a quick moment to acknowledge the arrival of His Excellency, the Prime Minister and his distinguished wife, as well as the arrival of His Excellency, the Minister of Finance, Communication, Utilities, and Energy, and his distinguished wife, as well as the additional members of Parliament, the honorable members of Parliament that have arrived. Thank you for being here tonight. So we now have our second speaker and panelist that's going to share with you her thoughts on what we can do in the area of social welfare and development for the St. Nicholas community. Mrs. Audrey Leclerc.
Good evening. I think the protocol part has been done, and we thank you, our host, for this. And so we can spin off right away with the next topic. For this topic, I have been visiting St. Nicholas for the last 4 or 5 days, and I've been in contact with several associations, doctors, house doctors, general practitioners, to know what is the living in St. Nicholas. Being there for the Caribbean Festival was also a very beautiful experience. So I'll start. Aruba as an island, with an Indian settlement in the 19th century, followed the gold rush, following by the prosperity brought by the opening of our oil transshipment facility in 1924, and in 1928 the refinery opened, the Lago Oil and Transport Company. Aruba flourished, and in the last decade of the 20th century, we saw the boom of the tourism industry. Aruba enjoyed a very low unemployment, and Aruba earned the reputation of the Las Vegas of the Caribbean. In 1985, the Lago announced their closing. In 1986, Aruba succeeded from the Netherlands Antilles. And because of the oil and the tourism industry, Aruba has imported a lot of foreign workers from all over the Caribbean and even the Far East. Since the closing and up to now, we have had Coastal, El Paso, and Valero. But what has these years brought as an added value to Aruba, and also in particular to St. Nicholas? I would say jobs, mediocrity, more health issues for the population, like we kindly say in Dushi Papiamento, pariba di brug. These reports and statistics are there. That is quite a taboo to speak about. Cancer cases increased, asthma and pulmonary diseases also. You can have this in the statistics of the medication given through the asset fee to the population, paribi brug, like we say. I understood that these statistics have been revealed at a Congress in Curacao. And so, do we value our society's health or their wealth? We should think deeply about this. What kind of a contract is in the wake? Like Jamal said, PetroChina, when we started this topic, was not in the game as yet, but has, during the last few weeks, exceeded Exxon's production, which was the biggest one. Will they comply with the pollution issues? Will it be a reprievement, or is it the Sandman throwing some sand in our eyes? And will we be in the same situation 1, 2, 3 years from now? We don't know, we don't have enough data. What the MOU contains is not known to us. And no government would like the refinery to be closed under their watch. Is it a short-term political gain? Economically? Yes, but we need then, in the reprieve time that we have, start working on other plans. I think we have to start working for the years to come. And we could use this time to change things around and have other jobs for our community. What about taking, and I also am agreeing with Mr. Malmberg, taking the harbor to the St. Nicholas area, where there is about 1.8 kilometers of coastline. And don't destroy more of our nature in Balashi. Make a nice Caribbean town in San Nicolas with the flavor it deserves. Set up the nightlife zone a little further up the street, and by the area that they started the Caribbean Fest by the bus station, more art, souvenir, Caribbean music, and let the people sell their products like local pica, sweets, and so on, and show their talent. There is a lot of talent in San Nicolas, a lot of painters, a lot of music, mimics, whatever they want to do. The third section could be the shopping area. And speaking with some members of Sunny Bar, which is the association of the bars in San Nicolas for the nightlife, they are willing to swap compatible buildings with the ones further down, so you could create more of a real shopping area in that section. I also interviewed people at the Caribbean Fest. They were selling food, Johnny Cake with bacalao, very nice. And the tourists were eating, they were buying. And interviewing them, they were also kind of fed up with the idea of the oil refinery, the pollution, and that nothing has changed during the last years after the Lago has left with the other three companies. I believe we can turn things around, and that ideas should be going on, and we could get this combination going with some more interesting places and do it more often. Have a strong association committed with heart and soul, combined with promised improvements and projects from our government, and ideas that could also come from others than just politicians. Short, medium, and long-term projects. I believe we can turn things around in this town and create a steady income. The night I visited the event, there were 3 buses full of the Palm Tours and 2 small buses of the Kinikini, and not counting the tourists and V-cars and locals that joined the crowd. It was very pleasant. If Aruba has an overnight stay of about 6,000 a week, and we can get 250 to visit the other side of the island at least 3 times a week, it's a good start. However, the amount of stores and restaurants cannot be sustained by just locals and the tourists we have at this moment. We think big, but we have a small economy of scale and would need more airlift to be able to be profitable. We need to raise the standard of living, and social commodities should be available also in San Nicolas. The charm of the Aruban citizen has to bloom like we were always known for, which will sell Aruba. Aruba was always sold not only for our beaches and the sun, but because of our people. Service is our business, and spiced up with kindness and lots of security and cleanliness. Thank you.
Audrey, thank you very, very much for sharing that with us. Audrey, San Nicolas, Pariba de Brug is very near and dear to her heart. So we thank you for that. Our third speaker and panelist is Mr. Milton Berlinski. So I'd like to invite Milton to come forward and to speak to us a little bit about the importance of keeping the refinery open.
Good evening, Governor, Prime Minister, other ministers, parliamentarians, chamber, businessmen, and guests. I'm honored to be part of the panel this evening, and I'll try to give you at least my perspective, which in the short term will be a little different. Maybe over the long term, we'll all end up in the same spot in terms of the solutions, although the one thing that I know from my own business experience is that whatever we expect today, I can assure you, if you wrote it down on a paper on where the world will be and where the refinery will be in 5 years, will all be wrong. We might get parts of it right, but we're going to all be wrong. So I think we need to think longer term, but we need to plan short and intermediate term. Just to give you a little bit of background, for those who don't know me, I was born in Aruba. I actually grew up in St. Nicholas. I went to school there. And then in those days, we took a bus and came to town for colegio. I went to colegio. After graduating colegio, I went to engineering school in California. Subsequently, I attended the University of Pennsylvania Wharton School of Finance, graduated with honors, worked at the World Bank, and then joined after that Booz Allen Hamilton as a strategy consultant. Booz Allen at the time was the second largest consulting firm in the world, and subsequently joined Merrill Lynch, and then was recruited by Goldman Sachs. I spent 26 years at Goldman Sachs, senior partner of the firm, head of strategy for the firm, and also ran most recently our financial sponsors business, which was dealing with the buyout firms globally. My last year, one of my assignments that I was involved with, actually it was more than a year, was helping PetroChina look at the refinery. The views that I'm going to give you today, though, do not represent anything that PetroChina has said to me, nor do I today have any role with PetroChina in their capacity as they look at this refinery. But I do want to share a perspective with you. So let's maybe start with, Valero. And I think this chart, when I talk about the importance of the oil industry, probably depicts my view of what we have to protect against. And that is that in the short term, we not do things that are catastrophic to the economy. Valero represents as much as 15% of Aruba's GDP, and indirectly plays a significant role in the success of subcontractors, freight handlers, retailers, restaurants, and you can just name them all. By all standards, the oil sector in Aruba contributes about 680 million guilders to the local economy, according to the government sources. Any industry that one were to think about that would replace the refinery would need to contribute at least as much, if not more, and that's really the big question. Therefore, a closing of the refinery, in my view, would result in a significant loss of jobs, have a materially negative impact on Aruba's economy, and would result in significantly higher unemployment. This could result in an increase in crime, which would, in my view, adversely impact our main industry, namely tourism. Furthermore, St. Nicholas, which has not benefited from the boom in tourism, given that it's been at this end of the island, has struggled for many years to keep its head above water, and would in the short to intermediate term become a ghost town. I think all of those are quite negative factors that if we can find a solution, we should try to avoid. So let's talk about the oil refining business. The oil refining business has been a difficult and unpredictable one for a long period of time, and as my other panelists have indicated, has been quite volatile for Aruba since 1995. Valero has shut its doors several times in the past 5 years. This is unlikely to change going forward, given world markets, but it's not unique to Aruba. The only parties, in my view, that are likely to be able to do well here are quasi-dependent parties like PetroChina that have their source at hand and thereby can make their upstream business profitable. The land on which the refinery is housed and its surrounding beaches could be very attractive, as others have indicated, to the tourism sector. However, we need to be realistic. This is a piece of land that has been used as a refinery for almost 100 years. Therefore, you've got to clean it up. In our estimate, the cleanup would be close to $1 billion in today's dollars, and it's, it's hard to tell until you start the work whether that number could exceed $1 billion. It's also unlikely that any major investments would be made by private industry before this was completed. Nobody wants to put, whether it's clean manufacturing or tourism, something on a polluted piece of land. The other complication, which no one has control over, is that under the existing contract that was entered into in the El Paso Valero period, the operator has the ability to close the refinery at any time and has a period of 3 years during which they can reopen it. And if they reopen it, the clock resets, even if they close it, a short period thereafter, and they have another 3 years. And so it's very hard to predict, even if you had the money today to do the cleanup, when you could actually get the land back to do that if Valero or any owner did not want to give it up. Therefore, a cleanup realistically would take a minimum of 5 to 6 years and could take even much longer before you could get it done to replace the closing of the refinery, which is why my previous chart had the economic disaster on it. Okay, now let's talk about the site. If you could actually clean it up over time or immediately, what else would it be attractive to? It would clearly be attractive to, Bruce, clean manufacturing. With the ongoing nationalizations, currency export controls, many U.S. companies, and I've listed some of them here for you, that operate in Venezuela, might find Aruba, because of its proximity to Venezuela, its stability in government, its friendliness of its people, its labor market, to be very attractive. In addition, as some have indicated, the Lago Harbor would make an ideal shipping harbor due to its ability to accommodate large vessels. And so if you created an industrial zone there, you could clearly help for future exports also, not only to places like Venezuela, but throughout the Caribbean and Latin America. But again, before you can do any of this, you would need to do the cleanup that I talked about a few minutes ago. The addition of new industries, I think, could be very attractive. It would both diversify Aruba's manufacturing base so that we would not be dependent on one company for such a large part of the industry. It would also create new jobs in sustainable industries and might give Aruba the opportunity to become a major export country. Aruba would benefit clearly if the current negotiations would allow for the modifications of the agreement with Valero. As I indicated earlier, though, it's very hard to negotiate something that you don't have the right to negotiate. So I actually wish the parties that are involved a lot of success, because I think any success they have in doing some of the things I'll articulate later on here would be welcome, but we shouldn't underestimate how difficult some of these things might be for the current government, for that matter, any government, to do, given the existing agreement in place. So just to put this now in context, PetroChina, which has been mentioned, obviously, I want to talk a little bit about PetroChina and why they are the ideal partner. Number one, PetroChina has the second largest market capitalization in the world of integrated oil and gas companies. Please put the... Its market capitalization is $355 billion and is second only to ExxonMobil at $405, followed by Royal Dutch with $242 billion. So this is a real substantial, substantive company. Its earnings before interest and tax is $60 billion a year. So they clearly have the resources to do some of the things that others who have operated, and Valero is a very tiny company, that others that have operated this refinery. The vast resources of PetroChina and the continued desire of the Chinese government to secure natural resources to feed their industrial machinery makes PetroChina an ideal partner. In addition, PetroChina is an important trading partner of Venezuela and vice versa. And that's a critical connection here also. So let's put this in context. In 2010, China became the world's biggest energy consumer, accounting for 20.3% of global use versus the United States at 19%. This trend is likely to continue as the Chinese economy and manufacturing base continue to expand at 3 to 5 times, again, 3 to 5 times the industrialized world. Even if they were to slow, they've got so much growth that they need to feed that this facility and the oil that they can get from places like Venezuela will be very important. Furthermore, Chinese manufacturing, transport, and even financial companies are looking for acquisitions to acquire technology, world-class brands, and global distribution. They also have great interest in storage technologies, shale gas, deep ocean drilling, which might be of interest to us. And to put another spin on this, most recently, if you go through the New York Times, you'll see, most recently the Chinese have been active financiers in the Caribbean, in mining, infrastructure, tourism, and last but not least, lodging. I believe the Chinese could be an important financier or equity partner for, among other things, our planned container harbor, future tourism projects, roads, infrastructure, all of which require a lot of capital, and they have it. By all estimates, China is expected to have between $1 trillion and $3 trillion to invest offshore by 2020. All of that would fit very nicely with many of the projects that we'd like to do. We don't need a lot of that, just a little bit. And I think that could be an attractive partner to have. And I think by developing this relationship with PetroChina, which indirectly is a government-controlled entity, that starts the dialogue towards future opportunities. Aruba would benefit if they were able to modify the current agreement, as I said, that exists with Valero during the negotiations with PetroChina. And I have no doubt that the group involved will try everything they can. One of the things that clearly would be helpful is if we could start to reclaim some of the land that's controlled by Valero, maybe a little bit every year, so that we can start a gradual cleanup. Because the billion-dollar cost is one that could also be laid out over time, and if you could start to do that, that could be quite attractive. This would provide increased employment for the cleanup. It will also allow the government to start an orderly transition away from a significant part of the islands that's dependent on one industry. And frankly, even though nobody talks about it, the government's already started to do that. So they have taken back, if you see here across from the Écurie station, where they're putting the tram, that used to be part of Valero, and they've been able to get that back, and that's going to be where the tram will start. Secondly, the very large area behind the wall section in Lagoweg and Bernhardstraat. The wall is being brought down, and that large square is going to become a very nice community park and plaza from what I understand. So there are two examples where, without a deal, they've been able to make progress along this line, and I believe it is quite possible they'll continue to do that given the relationships that they will develop with PetroChina if they were to come here. The big issue that we have to address is who will provide the estimated cost of about $1 billion to do the cleanup, and how does one justify that? I know how we justify it as Arubans, because we clean our island, we have a cleaner island, it's safer, we can do other things, but for investors or people who are going to do it, it's got to have an economic return. I've heard a bunch of alternatives that people have raised, but I have no ability to evaluate whether any of those, at the end of the day, if it cost somebody $1 billion, whether they would find it economically viable. So the presence of PetroChina, in my view, is very good for Aruba, both in the short term and intermediate term. The Chinese can be an important partner to Aruba's continued economic growth. Furthermore, if the government were able to reclaim, as they've already started, some of the land, it would give Aruba the opportunity in an organized and controlled fashion to clean up the grounds and either diversify into clean manufacturing, into other servicing industries, or extend the tourism sector to growth in St. Nicholas. Both would lead to a real rejuvenation of St. Nicholas and broaden the tax base. The question is, how realistic is it, given the cost associated with the cleanup, that we can get this done over a reasonable period of time? The one thing that's important, whether the refinery reopens for 1 year, 5 years, 10 years, or 15 years, I do think that planning ahead for the future and thinking about some of the cleanup issues are important, thinking about the redevelopment over time that we'd want to do for this area is important, and then lastly, what type of industry we'd like to attract there, because either way, over time, the shape of the refinery will change. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Milton. Wow, three distinct perspectives given by three individuals, all local, all concerned about the future of our country, but definitely individual ideas. So what I'd like to do right now is I'd actually like to open it up for our three panelists to have a little bit of a discussion. You may think that we're all aware of what each individual would be speaking about tonight. We knew what the subject matter was going to be, but we did not have the details. So I am confident that each of the panelists are eager to have a little bit of a discussion amongst themselves about what the others spoke about. So go at it, panelists.
More than delighted to do so. You know, one of the things that we've neglected is to do a good research on what the possibilities are, etc. I visited past top Lago executive, who's a friend of ours, and he told me that they had a Lago project to extract oil from the soil and make it profitable. And it became a business where they did well until they left. So what I want to do is, let's not be afraid of the $1 billion ticket item that we're looking there, because we haven't really looked into it like Milton said. We have to take a look at what the things that we have ahead of us that we might be afraid of, who might not be such a big problem. The second thing is that I have been told, and I didn't have enough time to actually investigate this, but there are companies in Europe who do the soil cleaning as a business. You don't have to pay them. They'll make the money out of it. They'll figure out a way to make the money. They'll come and take a look at it and then decide how long it will take them to do it. They resell it on a way, and they've managed to make it a profitable business. And this I want to caution that if we look at the big amounts, we probably won't do anything. And you're right, if you take the amount of money out of circulation that the refinery represents now, it can be a problem, but we can have those two going side by side. While you're talking with the one, if we can come to an agreement with Valero to reclaim the harbor of San Nicolas, then we can start by developing a business there, and we turn the service around. APA, who runs the harbor, will then serve the Chinese instead of it being there and we can't touch it. And in San Nicolas, the harbor is one of the areas that I see we have a great future to develop. Don't you think we should be able to do more research, find out more information, and see what the possibilities are out there, because there are a lot of companies out there that are doing business in this field, because contamination is something that has been there for a long time. So somebody must have figured out a way to make money out of it without us paying them.
Look, I'm not an expert. I'm now beyond my field of expertise, but what I'd say is, of course, there's no downside to trying to understand what the alternatives are for cleanup. Are there are there economic solutions that don't require us to have to put up $1 billion to get it done. But I'd be personally surprised, and I'm an optimist by life. I'd be surprised if there is such a thing that someone's going to put up $1 billion because there's enough economics in it for them. But again, since I don't have the expertise, I shouldn't assume not. It just seems like a very difficult thing. Having said that, I do think that ultimately, as you reclaim land, you're going to have to clean it up. So researching all of this and figuring out what the best alternatives are is a very smart and advisable approach.
Like you said, Milton, I'm also there beyond my expertise, but hearing the two of you really dissecting the whole problem, I would say that research at the moment is very important because there is a lot of money involved. If you don't have anything to give in exchange, you won't get the land back, and that is our main problem in order to diversify the economy. And I believe that this research has to be done ASAP because as time passes, everybody is like in a limbo. And when you are in limbo land, people get very negative. And when you get a negative crowd, it's not easy. Your community is not at ease. They feel very insecure. And the talks that go around raises all kinds of other problems. Then they start speaking about their sickness, crime starts coming up, and the lost jobs will bring a lot of havoc with it. So I believe we are ready now for the think tank group and see how far we can execute this complete research in order to get going, because we cannot stagnate and just sit there and wait. We have very little time. It's a reprievement, I believe, of the execution of these problems. So the time that we have, let's use it as much as possible. And I believe there is a lot of good, like we say in Dutch, kader here, that in Aruba that can make a good think tank and help out in this huge problem that we are facing, because we cannot let that part die off. Even if we would like to turn our faces, it will stab us in the back.
The only thing I want to add is that for 1985, when Lago closed, it's 27 years ago. Can you imagine it took that long? Mm-hmm. And now we're talking about the same subject again. Maybe if we had started in 1986 to tackle that problem, we would have had a solution, or we have something going already. I think in our community, neither the government nor the private sector can claim that they have an exclusivity in thinking of how to solve the problem. The only way it can be done if we do it together. But I think for us to be able to do it together, neither of the partners can say, guess what, I have a secret. We must share information. And if you don't have information and you want to help, you're going to be in a vacuum and you're going to be lost, and you're going to be in a situation that we are now, that we really don't know what is happening and what the desires are of the other partner, potential partner. So we're going to start to speculate and find out what we can do, because in the meantime, time is leaving us behind. Milton has warned us yesterday when we discussed that, because he doesn't like the word speculation. But you know, the business that you became big in does nothing else but speculate.
I don't know how to answer that.
He's left you speechless, Milton.
Yes.
We never thought this day would come.
It won't be the last time that Mr. Mollenberg leaves me speechless. I will say this, though. The one thing that I did do for most of the 26 years was being merger advisor. And you can't negotiate and have it be a public negotiation. You can, but it's usually unsuccessful. And so I understand the frustration of not knowing as much as you would like, but there's no other way. The notion that you would have a public negotiation and then get 100,000 inputs, it just doesn't work. There's no doubt once a deal is concluded that as people think about the other alternatives in the future and developing plans, if there is a cabinet like what you were discussing, that they'll share the things that are appropriate to share. Obviously, certain things a buyer always requests as part of the deal that they remain confidential, and I don't know that whether that's happening or not, but there's enough information that you can get after a deal is done where you can get smart on the issues that we're talking about, which is there an ability to reclaim land? Is there an ability to clean it up? Can we investigate the cost of doing that? How would we fund it? And some of these, even in a vacuum, not knowing any of the facts, you could start to work on.
Can start working. I fully agree with you. But we do have one thing is that the other party has already divulged that they're willing to pay $350 million to buy Valero, so it's no longer a secret. It's in all the papers. So we can't...
You actually believe what you read?
Yeah. So if one half of the party says, listen, this is what I plan to do, then it's no longer a secret.
See, I'm a skeptic. I never believe what I read in newspapers because they're always wrong or they're selling papers.
Yes, they haven't necessarily done the research that the three of you keep talking about, right? Absolutely.
There's a lot of research to be done.
Yes.
But at least if we don't start now, 27 years from now, we'll still be there and I won't be here.
You never know.
So, Audrey, during our discussions yesterday in particular, you had some very specific concerns about the health issue, and you mentioned that in your presentation as well. Would you mind elaborating a little about that?
Correctly. I've mentioned that because that is an issue that in conversation with different citizens and also departments, so the general practitioner chair and from Paribi-Brug, like we say, and also the oncology department, you could get the information that most cases, cancer cases, I mean the majority is from Paribi-Brug or close by the area. And we have a lot of people that give their testimony to that, and that is one of the issues that is one of their big concerns. Of course, the loss of jobs also came into perspective that if, you know, that is happening. But we also have other, I think, bigger problems than just the loss of jobs of Valero and the income. It's the mentality that is up there that they feel that they've been left behind. And it's that they don't count. That's the way they have been feeling, and that they are only good for certain things, like the dirty part of the industry. And I don't believe that we should treat our citizens like that, our people like that. And it's very hard to say, and I say we started, I know the bloom of St. Nicholas. I remember when I was a young girl, when all the best business were up there and it was blooming. But we were not concerned at that time with the modus operandi and the problem of the pollution. But nowadays, I don't think that type of refinery would stand up anywhere else in the world, but in Aruba. The people are still accepting this. So that is one of the big concerns that came into light, and I believe that we should be able to give them a fair chance of trying to turn things around. And like Milton mentioned, the claiming little by little some of the land, and it's been happening. I think that is a smart way to do it. It's like eating a little bit of the cheese all the time. Who is moving who? So I think we need to be very smart. We should have very good specialists in these negotiations and people that are very well known with the subject and what can be done for this, because I agree with Mr. Malenberg that if we have started 27 years ago, maybe the scenario at this moment would have been completely different. And sometimes things tend to roll out not the way we think they will, like Milton said, and they'll be in a complete different place, in a complete different area where we don't even ever have thought about.
Thank you, Audrey. Thank you. So what I'd like to do now is I'd actually like to open it up to question and answer, with the first question being asked by our Prime Minister. Prime Minister Amon, I know you are just itching to get up out of that seat. You can do anything you like, sir. Would you like a cordless mic?
No, it's good, thank you.
Good to see you, sir.
My friends, colleague ministers, members of parliament, distinguished guests and speakers, I missed the opening speech of the chairman of the Chamber of Commerce, but he passed me his speech, so I'll read it tonight and see if I can digest it, and if we will have a lot of food for more discussions in the future. No, very short, this is evening of the Chamber and this distinguished panel. I do believe it's very important that the Chamber of Commerce in Aruba opens up the discussion to such a topic which is so important for Aruba, and even a very delicate subject. So it's very a good example of what we do in Aruba in dialogue, and what we do in Aruba in order to create the discussions to get to better decisions for the future of Aruba. I won't be honest with myself if I won't make some comments with regard to what has been said. And for the first, I find it quite erroneous that I hear tonight from the panel of the Chamber of Commerce that we should have started 27 years ago, because 27 years ago Aruba had a very young prime minister that was almost lynched because he started with a new direction for the economy of Aruba, and it was the same Chamber of Commerce which is organizing this event tonight that pressured him that he was doing something very irresponsible by starting the cleanup of the refinery of Aruba. So after 27 years, Mr. Yamal, congratulations, een applauso voor wat men noemt soms een vertraagde verlichting of the insight of what we have to do. At that moment, as a matter of fact, it was easier because Exxon cooperated with the cleanup. We had a commitment of Exxon for almost 400 million guilders to do the cleanup at that time. That was going and progressing in Aruba. And there was a lot of concern in the community that we should not do that, and that we should look for a reopening of the refinery. And as actually the Chamber was leading that opposition towards the other direction that the enlightened politicians of that time were choosing. And so it's very important to make that side note for also the history of the debate and of Chamber's own history on this subject. Important.
Do you have a question, sir?
No. I only have comments. Only comments.
I was just checking.
Only comments. I believe that we have looked at the possibilities of immediately starting up something different. And I'm very happy that Mr. Berlinski gave the alternatives that the community of Aruba had, where it's not a question that we could start tomorrow with a different alternative, because it would be a very fair discussion and a very good discussion to look at the choices. But at this moment, the reality of the contract is that at least we'll have to wait 3 years before we have the refinery, the property in our hands in order to go into another direction. And that is what really makes it more difficult to make this choice. And also with regard to the cleanup, Mr. Malenberg mentioned that there are possibilities maybe to get companies that would do it. Mr. Malenberg has much more experience than I do, so if we could have that information, we would like to have it. We don't have it. But I would like to say, as end, that's not the question, if we want a different direction and an alternative for Aruba besides the refinery, we don't need to wait, as very eloquently stated by Mr. Malenberg, by Mr. Belinsky, by Mrs. Laclay. We can start today. We think we're doing that with the third economic pillar, with the knowledge industry, with TNO and other activities we are doing, and we would invite all these very clever minds that we see in this room tonight to join us. But I do want to, and again, I would not be sincere and honest with myself, to express a concern. Because in order to do that, you need very gutsy investors to try something that we are not doing today, something totally new. We used to have them. Mr. Malenberg, pioneer, Mr. De Veer, Mr. Cruz, I see here, different of the investors that at a very critical time in the history of Aruba had the guts to go to a bank and mortgage all their assets in order to start something new for Aruba. I must tell you, I'm not so impressed today of that same vision, that same guts to do something different. In order to create a new economic pillar, you need a lot of people with ideas and vision and a lot of guts. And if I see what we're going through now, I'm just a small example of the Main Street. I still have to see one investor going to borrow 100 guilders to buy a pot of paint to start painting the front door of their business. They're all waiting until the tram is really riding through the street in order that to happen. Now, if even that challenge, because every day people knock on my door for a piece of property in front of the hotels with 8,000 rooms, that's a no-brainer. You don't have to be a great business person to know if I open a restaurant or a shop in front of 8,000 hotel rooms, I'm going to make business. But it takes some guts to build a third economic pillar, and it takes some guts not to wait until we have refurbished the whole Oranjestad for you to step to the bank and borrow some money and start building something new in the center of our city. And I still don't see that. Yesterday I spent my whole day talking one by one with business leaders in the Main Street in order to create some of that enthusiasm and create some of that inspiration needed to do something that's quite simple. It's anticipating on something that's coming, and it's very clear that's coming. Imagine the creativity, the inspiration, the guts we need to start investing in a third economic pillar we don't even know. So for the Chamber of Commerce, I would like to see a seminar where we're going to inspire people to have that guts, to go to the bank and borrow money to start building on that third economic pillar. If this was the topic of tonight, I was definitely more happy than I am tonight, but still very pleased with what I see the Chamber of Commerce doing and the contribution of these great speakers. Thank you very much, and hope that we can have in the coming weeks and months more discussion on the new direction Aruba should take. Thank you.
Okay, so that's what I get for allowing the Prime Minister to ask the first question. Thank you, sir. Thank you for sharing your views with us. Thank you.
Can I mention one thing?
Yes.
I am glad that the minister came and said, I'm going to tell you a question. But there are a number of things that happened in the past and that the investors did at that moment. And if I use the Palm Island as an example, when I took my banker there, it was a pile of rocks, and he told me, take me back to my bank because you're crazy. Okay? He doesn't say the same thing now, but that is what happened. However, the moment I made the investment, I knew that we had 2,500 rooms and that 6,000 rooms were in the pipeline to be built, and they would be ready in a number of years. So at the time I needed to do the construction, the market was not ready for it. It was too small, but I knew the market was going to be there. So I think that for the Prime Minister, if I can give you an advice, would be ask those people why they don't invest. There might be reasons that would surprise you. So no, not talk to them, ask them.
So maybe we're going to turn this into a fundraiser for paint tonight. I'm going to have guts. I'll donate $1,000 for paint. Okay?
So do we hear $2,000? $2,000. Come on. $2,000. Sold. Any questions out there?
Okay, my voice is pretty loud, I think. I'm just curious, where's the 1 billion for cleanup coming from? Are there very detailed reports, or is it only from one side?
I'm not sure when you say one side, but you know, when we were doing work, and this is in my capacity at Goldman Sachs, and we were thinking about the refinery, the estimates that we had outside sources do in collaboration with the discussions with PetroChina, because it wasn't clear what standards someone would be held to, given where the standards globally are moving, given where PetroChina operates its own refineries worldwide. Indeed, they've been given a number of awards, by the way, for how they operate. They've had problems like everybody who operates refineries. The numbers that kept coming back, you know, ranged from sort of $900 to $1 billion. But you know, think of it like what I call phase one environmental studies. So if somebody were actually going to do more work on it, you know, it's like drilling a hole looking for bad stuff in the ground. You sort of don't drill because once you have the knowledge, you're typically obligated to do something about it. But those were the phase one estimates that we got back at the time.
The question is directed to Mr. Berlinski. I understand about the NDAs and other information that needs to be remain secret while it's in negotiation, but we do have many persons in this audience here, both in Parliament and also in the Chamber, who are sworn to secrecy. So why is it that it has to be that secret that when there is a need to have a broader discussion and get more insight, that it is not open enough? Maybe you have a solution from your experience there.
Look, first, I'm not involved in the negotiations, so I can't answer that question. I can't answer a general question, which is, it would be highly unusual for any party that's in negotiations with a third party, whether it be a government or a business, to disclose those discussions without the permission of that other party. And having done work with the Chinese myself, worked for them, I can tell you that every document that they produce on every single page, in as big a letters as you can see, say highly confidential. And they're very, very paranoid about confidentiality. So you could actually jeopardize the negotiations. And again, I'm not speaking, I have no facts about the current discussions that are taking place, but it would be highly unusual to do that. And I think, frankly, look, you've empowered, as a country, you've empowered people to represent you. They're like your team. and you should trust that they're going to do the best they can. Because, by the way, it's in their own interest. And you know, every 4 years or whatever elections are, if you don't think they've served your interests, just like in every other country, you'd make a change. But you have to trust them that they're doing the right things, and that they understand the issues. And frankly, forums like this, I think, are good to the extent that there's something that's new that comes up that they can incorporate. I'm sure they will. But I got to believe that none of the issues that any of us are raising are issues that they've either not thought about or heard for the first time, regardless of how we, you know, what our own perspectives are on it. So, long way of saying is, I don't think there's a better solution, but they're in the room. You should feel free to ask them.
Okay.
Good evening, Mr. Berlinski. In your experience, did you ever read or have knowledge about a research here for offshore tax business? As they have in Curacao, I think it's quite a big business over there. Do you have any knowledge whether that would be feasible for Aruba? And if yes, what, for example, regulation by the central bank or current laws are they fit for it at this moment, or do we need a lot of adaptation to that?
In all honesty, I have not spent any time on that. My only comment would be that if given how feasible it was for Curacao to develop that business, unless something's changed structurally or from a policy standpoint, I don't see why you couldn't develop that business. I don't know what the barriers to entry are, so you need to look at business and say, okay, what are the barriers to entry? How do you get started? And is the model moving forward in that direction or moving away from? So what I mean by that is, you know, there were a lot of offshores that were done in you know, some of the English territories that, and places like Liechtenstein, et cetera, that no longer are viewed by those countries as attractive, not because they don't want to do it, but because there's so much pressure from governments in other parts of Europe, et cetera, to do away with it, and on their corporations not to do it. But you know, it's certainly something that I don't see why you wouldn't spend time on, and I got to believe somebody's done work on that that's interested in that area.
Good evening. My name is Helen Mangrulal. I want to go back to when Lago, the refinery, closed. I sent an advice and letter to Minister Cruz, Rudy Cruz at the time, where I advised him I was concerned with the environmental issues and with the cleaning up. So I advised him, because Aruba was depending on oil inspection of Curacao. So after the status of parties, we didn't have any entity that would act immediately on the island. So I advised him to see if we can establish our own Coast Guard and see if we can get the aid, technical aid from Holland to do so. In the same advice, I wrote another advice where I say that why don't we try to establish in Cerro Colorado a marine biological research center that would do scientific research and work for Bodem Onderzoeken. Okay? That would be a start. I also wrote the idea that why don't we do that, because research, I've done research myself for years in Holland, costs a lot of money. It's very costly. Advised to, and as government you can do it, it's much easier. It costs to approach financial institutions as the World Bank and the United World Bank. That would be, I think, a step number one, because we are in a process now that we cannot afford not to have the refinery for economic reasons. So we have to support the government right now to go ahead and do what they're doing, because we can't do without. In the same plan, I had another plan, which was a pilot project for the fishery. The pilot project would grow into an economy. Okay, so all I want to say is I'm concerned about environmental issues. So if we start working on that, at least we have those 2 years to start doing some research, work on a plan. I've written my plan of what I want for the development of that area. It was in the newspapers last month, so I don't want to go into details. Government, I would say, make sure that the terms and conditions with our new partners in PetroChina are based on international law for environment. That's all.
All right, so I think that was more sharing of some information that those members of government that are in the room, some food for thought, and of course it went very much in line with Audrey's concerns as well.
Hi, good evening. This question is for Mr. Belinsky. You had a lot of positives for PetroChina, and I was wondering, are there any downturns or downfalls if PetroChina came to Aruba that you can mention?
Downfalls, that's, boy, that's quite a word. Look, you know, anytime you have a new partner, right, there's uncertainty as to how they'll integrate in the community and culturally how compatible they are with our culture. You know, my own experiences with the Chinese is that they are, you know, they're very they care about people, and so they're very people oriented. They're as tough as any businessman that's, you know, runs a business like that, and don't make any qualms. It doesn't matter whether they're Chinese, Dutch, or American, or any other nationality. It's a tough business to run. But I actually think that on balance, it's very hard for me to think of other than, you know, what the cultural integration will be over time, whether there are any really negative issues that I can see, because I think they have all the right elements for what needs to be accomplished, both in the short term and the intermediate term, in addition to the added benefit of the capital, access to capital, which has always been a big issue for Caribbean islands as you try to do infrastructure projects, as you try to build big projects, whether they be tourism, industry, or other. And so it's very hard for me to see any downside. And I think, you know, I suspect that if they're smart people, they know that if they're not hospitable to us, we won't be hospitable to them. And so I think it's got to be, hopefully, if they do come, people will welcome them and make them feel at home. And I suspect you'll be pleasantly surprised by how welcoming they will be of you. So I strongly encourage that.
And I really would like to give each of our panelists one last opportunity. Take 60 seconds to summarize the thought that you would like each and every one of us to take away with us tonight.
Yes, I wrote down a short synopsis. I've tried to divert our attention away from focusing so much on the refinery and sketch a picture while this journey seemed to be over and behind us. But that is because of lack of information. Number two, in this, I have examined the relationship between outproducing countries and the oil companies, as well as the strategy of the OPEC members. We now have to brainstorm, preferably in a think tank form, on the service industry available to Aruba. What kind of opportunities are there? We already have the hotel industry. I can remind people that I remember when Mr. Erskine talked about building the first hotel in Aruba, he made it known that he had to go and lend money to enlarge Webb. And everybody said, this guy is going to put us in big trouble. So he had clear in his mind what this would be, and it would be long term. The fact is that we don't have usable raw materials in our soil as far as we know. And we have outlived our oil refining life. So we now have to go after the opportunities open to us in the service industry. I've given one example of what can be done with our harbors, but I'm sure that many more opportunities can be found if we search hard enough. I particularly attempted to show the importance for us to make the right choices regarding the use of our harbors. It would be a mistake to put Barcadera as our primary relocation for our container harbors if we have Lago there. But since it's owned by Valero, we probably have to come to a deal with Valero because that's the best location to move the container harbor to. But at that time, it was not known that Valero was going to be closed. Now we know it. I'm afraid that due to the developments in the world stage, oil refinery is behind us, and we just have to accept that fact. That is how I see it, and I could be wrong. But after having seen so many, a handful of companies already making an attempt, they didn't make it, they closed it, sold it to another, and walked away, it is not very encouraging.
Thank you, Mr. Malmberg. Audrey, would you like to take a minute to conclude?
Yes, thank you. I would like to make a little recap by saying that I believe also that that era is behind us. We should taking it step by step to the next level, and we would need a group and be thinking out of the refinery box. Prioritize health issues and build up a community with a decent standard of living. Have their commodities up to par, and the outcome should be a Caribbean town with all the right ingredients. And that's what we're looking for as a community, as a social welfare event that should happen to St. Nicholas. Thank you.
Thank you, Audrey. Thank you. Okay, Mr. Berlinski, your moment in the sun.
Okay, I stand between you, dinner, and drinks, so I'll make this quick. Look, I believe the future for Aruba is bright. The combination of our people, our optimism, and our ability to struggle through tough times and come up with creative ideas has always been a hallmark of Aruba, and I see no reason why that won't be the case. Whether the refinery business should be here for 1 year, 5 years, 10 years, or 20 years, I don't know. I'm not smart enough to know that. I do believe, though, that it would be a disaster in the short to intermediate term to not have it here. I believe that PetroChina, if the negotiators who you've empowered are able to bring this to a successful conclusion, is the best partner, not only because of their size, their desires for energy resources, but their relationships with Venezuela, which make them very unique, since that's where the crude that we are going to have to refine would come from. I think developing a plan that is a real long-term plan that says, what do we want, whether it's what the Prime Minister said, the third pillar, or maybe it's the fourth pillar. What do we want it to be for that area? How do we get there over time? And time could be 25 years. Sorry, you won't be here, Mr. Malmberg.
Yeah, you're right.
But I do think having a real plan as to where we're going to go with it is crucial, and then find the alternatives to how we clean it up as the land becomes available. And I have no doubt that just given the track record of the government, that they will continue to do everything they can to take back increasingly more and more pieces of the land, particularly if it's not being used to facilitate the refinery.
Thank you, Milton. Thank you. Please, a warm round of applause for our panelists.
Ladies and gentlemen, I will not answer the Prime Minister's question about the chamber. I think I'll see him enough in private moments. I will give him my answer. Because the fastest and the shortest way would be for me, I was not on the island, so I'm out of the loop. But I don't think that would be the correct answer. So I will give my answer to him on another moment in another occasion. Prime Minister, I owe you an answer. For the panelists, I would like to thank them very much. Mr. Malmberg, thank you for your time and for your thoughts. Mr. Belinsky, personally, I would like to have, let's say, a session of a couple of hours with you. But unfortunately, neither me nor the chamber most likely can afford the hourly rates you will charge us.
By the way, at the rate I got paid for this, they can, 0.
Okay, so Mr. Belinsky hereby offers a couple of hours extra against $0 per hour. I will take you on that challenge, Mr. Belinsky. And we will do, because there will be most likely questions written, and we would like to answer them. It will be either most likely also, or most likely for sure on our website. So please take a look in the coming 2 weeks. I don't know the schedules of the panelists, so please give us some leeway. Mr. Belinsky, thank you very much. I know you're a busy man. You took your time to prepare and deliver a speech. It is kind to know, I mean, even you said that you are not part of the negotiations with PetroChina, but being part of the negotiation with the previous government, and most likely with this current government, that part at the moment when, I think it was in 2010 when they were negotiating. So you are a bit more privy to what at least they were thinking at that time. I don't think the world has changed that much. Definitely not the relation between PetroChina and Venezuela. So, being a business administration graduate myself, I don't think in short term business cases changes that much, and definitely not in the oil industry. It's not changed that much in these last 2 years. In my own speech, I also, for the Prime Minister only actually this part is, that when we decided about this topic, at that moment there was no.
If it's only for the Prime Minister, should we all cover our ears?
No, it's just only, I would enlighten him that only for the first part, that when we decided about the topic, PetroChina was not on the horizon. And we could decide as a chamber to redo the topic or pick another topic. But on the other hand, we have nothing against PetroChina nor a new buyer. Go through my speech, which you have, you will see that. It is about, and basically we all agree tonight, that we should prepare ourselves for the future instead of sticking our head in the sand. And unfortunately, maybe that's what the biggest problem we have in Aruba. We have enough beach to collectively stick on our head in the sand, and there is space over. So, and from time to time we should take our head off and take a look around us, what's going around. Audrey, I would like to call you Audrey, because spent some time with her in São Paulo. It was a pleasant surprise to know her on another way. I thank you very much for your time. I know you're a busy business lady and a busy social person doing a very good job in Aruba. And I know this topic came yesterday very close to you. And I'm still very much pleased that you still managed to be here tonight. I thank you very much for your time and effort. For the total panel, I thank you very much for your time and effort. Dear attendants, we have taken care of your intellectual appetite. We're going to take care of your, the real appetite. That will be just now. And later on, we'll take care of your soul. But for now, I give the mic back to Michelle. Thank you very much.
Actually, Jamal, don't leave yet. Audrey would like to say something before we conclude.
Well, this is also for our Prime Minister. Prime Minister, I didn't see you yesterday because I was in St. Nicholas. But I would like to enlighten you on my request when we started the plan Bo Aruba, when I was there and requested a better interest rate for people to start working on their building. And I would like to tell the community that is sitting here, the business community and in general, that in our business, the same month that you started breaking the street, this government started with a project, we also made an investment, and at the percentage that we have asked the bank for. And we made the back door, front door. And we have 2 entrances. You can come through the sand, or you can come through the asphalt way, right? And when the sand is moving, there is people in the street, so we're happy. So tomorrow, wear your boots and come to the main street. And I applaud this project, which is a struggle for us all, the government, the business community, the whole population of Aruba suffering of getting to work or getting to the place they want to be. But please don't look at that. Look at the finished product that we are eager to embrace in December. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, I promise you this is my final words. I would like to thank Michelle Brooks for being the moderator tonight. And Mr. Belinsky, she also does it for $0. Thank you very much, Michelle.
Thank you. Thank you very, very much. Okay, so before we continue with the rest of our evening, again, thank you. Thank you to our panelists. Thank you to all of you. Thank you for your attention, for being engaged in the program tonight. We appreciate that. But I would like now to ask everyone to please stand for the departure of our governor. Well, we've had a wonderful program. Our panelists are actually excused. You may be seated too, but at your tables with your guests. And again, we just want to thank everyone for their rapt attention tonight. And I'd like to announce that the dinner buffet is now open. After the dinner buffet, we hope that you'll stay a while to enjoy the musical sounds of Tsunami. Bon appetit, and please enjoy your dinner.